This noodle was the very first noodle I saw when I came to China 20 years ago. My first morning in the hotel, on the breakfast buffet, there was somebody pulling noodles. Captivated me that day and still captivates me today, almost 20 years later. So there's thousands of types of noodles in China. There are noodles made from buckwheat, from oats, from corn, from rice, from sweet potato starch, from wheat flour. So there's a million ways to make noodles, and as I'm going across China for my book to write about all the different types of noodles in this country, we see them made all different types of ways, but this is the place that's most famous for pulling them by hand. There's no tools involved, there's no knife, there's no nothing. It's just your hands, a little bit of alkaline, some wheat flour, some water, some salt, and your skill. So I came back to Lanzhou, a city in China's northwest, once a major transit point on the Silk Road, where they make noodles by hand. No knives, no rolling pins, no machines. These are Lanzhou's lamian, hand-pulled noodles. It's 7:07 a.m. We're here in Lanzhou, the hometown of beef noodles. That's what we're having for breakfast. It's a breakfast food, it's not a dinner food. On my last trip to the city, which I've been visiting off and on for more than 15 years, I dove deep into the city's noodle culture. Straight from the airport, Mr. Du and I visited 5 or 6 shops and talked about the origins of the city's hand-pulled noodles. Unlike a lot of my obsessions and a lot of food stories in China and around the world, when you go looking for the history of snack foods, when you go looking for the history of foods that were not recorded in the history books, there's a lot of gray area, there's a lot of myth, there's a lot of fable, a lot of misinformation. Unlike most snack food, whose history was never properly recorded, the story of Lanzhou noodles is clearly traceable to one guy, a Hui Muslim street seller named Ma Baozi. In 1915, Ma began selling a combination of the city's traditional hand-pulled noodles with his own special beef noodle soup. 4 years later, he opened a shop and became famous across Lanzhou for the taste and the clarity of the soup. No color, but full of flavor, as the saying went. A few years later, his son, Ma Jie-san, joined the business and began standardizing the family recipe. Clear beef soup, fragrant chili oil flicked on top of the soup so it floats, braised radish, chopped garlic shoots. Today, the family's invention lives on to the generations of cooks in the city's 1,500 noodle shops, some of whom can trace their master's lineage back directly to Ma Jie-san. On this trip, Mr. Du introduced me to Ma Baozi's grandson, a chef himself since 1967, Mr. Hai. Hai dabbled in noodles but didn't become the official inheritor of his grandfather's legacy, a title that went to someone else. But Hai was at Ma Baozi's funeral as a child, and on our second day took us to see the family cemetery plot, up in the hills north of the city, where Ma's tombstone declares him to be the inventor of the city's famous beef noodles. So we're climbing up here to see the tomb of Ma Baozi and see that all over the place there's this pangsao growing, which is the grass that gets turned into the alkaline water that allows noodles to be pulled. So here, all growing around Ma Baozi's tomb and around Ma Baozi's final resting place is the grass that allowed his noodle to be made.
兰州市人，生于1870年，归正1755年，享年85岁。曾宗属马宝子之末，牛肉面厂市人，郑后仪尽力。2018年7月。
The next day, Hai invited all of us to his house for lunch. The city's tastes have changed in the last couple of decades, and today people in Lanzhou like their noodles strongly flavored. They care more about the chili oil and the amount of beef than the clarity of the broth. For Hai, the change is too much, and that day he pulled and cooked us beef noodles as they used to be, warmed in a clear beef broth seasoned with just a few spices. It was touching, eating one of China's best-known bowls of noodles the grandson of the man who invented it, and Mr. Du, the man who literally wrote the book about it. I'm almost done, but I think this is probably the most important noodle of my life from Mr. Hai. There's a million angles to Lanzhou's noodles, from the chemistry of the alkaline dough to a national noodle industry worth billions of dollars. It's a dish I can't stop talking about, one that gets more fascinating with every bowl and every person I meet. This is really a living legacy. This is really something that exists very strongly in Lanzhou to this day, and we can trace its roots directly back to one guy in 1919 who put this soup together with these noodles and with the condiments and made something so good that 100 years later, we're still eating it.